March 8, 1941. Vincent Calibri walked into the Apollo Theater in Harlem and disrespected Bumpy Johnson in front of 200 people. Everyone expected violence. They expected shouting. They expected chaos. They expected the night to end in seconds. Instead, Bumpy Johnson smiled. He leaned forward and spoke quietly. Count to 50. No one understood what that meant. 50 minutes later, powerful criminal groups across New York received a message they would never forget. After that night, no one ever challenged Bumpy Johnson again. To understand why, the story must go back to that moment. The Apollo Theater. Harlem, 11:32 at night. The room was full. Music played softly. People laughed. Glasses clinked. It was supposed to be a normal evening. Then Vincent Calibri stepped up to Bumpy Johnson's table. He leaned forward and showed public disrespect. Time seemed to slow. The music stopped. Conversations ended mid-sentence. People froze where they sat. Everyone in that room knew the rules. You did not disrespect Bumpy Johnson in public. People waited for the response. They waited for anger. They waited for force. They waited for the end. But Bumpy Johnson did not react. He reached for his napkin. He wiped his face once. Then again. Then he folded the napkin carefully and placed it on the table. He stood up slowly. Not rushed. Not emotional. Completely calm. Count to 50, he said again. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. Vincent Calibri tried to laugh. But his smile did not last. What no one in that room knew was this. Bumpy Johnson had been expecting this moment for weeks. This was not a surprise. This was not an accident. This was not anger. This was a plan. And the clock had just started. To understand what happened next, you must first understand Harlem in 1941. You must understand the kind of power Bumpy Johnson built, and why some lines, once crossed, can never be undone. To understand what happened that night, you first need to understand Harlem in 1941. Harlem was not just a neighborhood. It was a system. Music filled the streets at night. Jazz poured out of clubs and theaters. People dressed well, even when money was tight. Laughter and struggle lived side by side. During the day, life was harder. Jobs were limited. Banks refused loans. The justice system often looked the other way. Many families lived one bad week away from losing everything. World War II was already burning across Europe. Young black men were signing up to fight, hoping service would finally bring respect at home. But in Harlem, respect worked differently. Money moved through quiet channels. Trust mattered more than contracts. Protection mattered more than laws. One system ruled daily life more than any other. The numbers game. People bet small amounts of money on simple number combinations. Pennies. Nickels. Hope. For many families, it was the only chance to change their situation. This system brought in millions of dollars every week, and powerful groups outside Harlem wanted control of it. They sent messengers. They sent offers. They sent pressure. Nothing worked. Because Harlem already had leadership. Not loud leadership. Not flashy leadership. A calm one. Bumpy Johnson did not rule Harlem with noise or fear. He understood something others did not. People follow the person who protects them. When rent was due and money was short, help appeared. When schools needed support, funds showed up quietly. When families were about to lose their homes, problems were solved without headlines. No speeches. No public credit. No announcements. This was not kindness. It was strategy. By helping people survive, Bumpy earned loyalty. And loyalty is stronger than fear. So when outsiders tried to take Harlem, they weren't fighting one man. They were fighting a community that had already chosen its side. This is why public disrespect mattered so much. It was not just an insult to one person. It was a challenge to an entire system. And systems, when threatened, respond. Not quickly, not emotionally, but completely. All right. By 1941, Bumpy Johnson was already known across New York, but not for shouting, not for flashy violence, not for public threats. He was known for something quieter. Control. Bumpy was not a large man. He did not fill a room with noise. When he entered a place, people noticed him because he spoke less, not more. He watched. He listened. He waited. This confused his enemies. Most men in his world tried to rule with fear. They believed power came from guns, anger, and fast reactions. Bumpy believed the opposite. Fear breaks quickly. Respect lasts. He understood that people follow rules when they believe those rules protect them. So he focused on choice. No one in Harlem was forced to support him. They chose to. If someone worked honestly, they were left alone. If someone needed help, it came quietly. If someone caused harm inside the community, the response was firm and final. This created order. People felt safer because they understood the boundaries. They knew which lines not to cross. That understanding was power. Bumpy also believed in patience. He did not react in the moment. He did not let insults decide his actions. Reaction is emotional. Response is planned. Every decision was measured against the future. If he acted today, what would happen tomorrow? If he punished one man, what lesson would others learn? Most leaders never ask those questions. That is why they fall. Bumpy also knew that violence, when used, had to mean something. Not random, not excessive, not emotional. If force was ever used, it was meant to end a problem completely, so it would never need to happen again. This way of thinking made him dangerous. Not because he was cruel, but because he was careful. And careful power is the hardest kind to challenge. This was the mindset Vincent Calibri failed to understand. He believed power was loud. He believed respect came from fear. He believed humiliation would break Bumpy's control. He was wrong. Because Bumpy Johnson did not defend his position with noise, he defended it with structure, and structure does not bend easily. Bumpy Johnson did not learn patience as an adult. He learned it as a child. The lesson began far from New York, in South Carolina, in the year 1916. Bumpy was only 10 years old. One afternoon, he stood outside his family's home and watched something that stayed with him for the rest of his life. Two police officers were speaking to his father, William Johnson. The conversation was not respectful. It was not fair. His father was pushed down in front of him. People nearby did nothing. No one stepped in. Bumpy felt anger rise inside him. He wanted to act. He wanted to stop what he was seeing. But his father looked at him. Just one look. The message was clear. Not now. The officers left soon after. They laughed as they walked away. William Johnson stood up slowly. He brushed himself off. He said nothing. That night, Bumpy heard his parents talking quietly. There was no shouting, no rage, only calm words. His father explained something simple. Anger feels strong, but it makes bad decisions. Patience feels weak, but it gives you time to think. That lesson stayed with Bumpy. He learned that reacting in the moment can cost you everything. Waiting gives you control. From that day on, he made himself a promise. He would never let anyone force him to kneel. But he would also never act without thinking. Patience did not mean weakness. It meant preparation. Years later, when people insulted him or tested him, he remembered that moment. He remembered the look in his father's eyes, and he chose control over impulse. This is why silence became his weapon. This is why he waited instead of striking. And this is why, when he finally did act, it mattered. That childhood lesson shaped every decision he made. By early 1941, pressure was building outside Harlem. Large criminal groups across New York were losing money. And in their world, losing money meant losing power. One group felt this loss more than the others. The Genovese crime family had watched Harlem for years. They wanted control of the numbers game. They wanted the money. But more than that, They wanted respect. From their point of view, one neighborhood was standing in their way, and that neighborhood was led by one man, Bumpy Johnson. This created a problem. If they ignored him, they looked weak. If they attacked him directly, they risked a long war. Both options were dangerous. So they looked for another path. Not violence, not negotiation, humiliation. In their system, public shame was powerful. If a leader looked weak in front of his own people, his control could fall apart on its own. No bullets needed. No war started. Just an image. The plan was simple. Disrespect him in public. In his territory. In front of witnesses. If he reacted, it could start a war they were ready for. If he did nothing, his reputation would collapse. Either way, they believed they would win. This was their mistake. They thought power worked the same everywhere. They did not understand Harlem. They did not understand loyalty. And they did not understand the man they were testing. Because Bumpy Johnson was not holding power by fear alone. He was holding it by choice. And when people choose their leader, humiliation does not break that bond. It strengthens it. Still, the plan moved forward. A message was sent. A man was chosen. A date was set. And while they believed they were preparing a public lesson for Harlem, Bumpy Johnson was already listening. The plan was not about winning territory. It was about breaking an image. The people behind it believed that if Bumpy Johnson was embarrassed in public, his power would disappear on its own. They chose the setting carefully. The Apollo Theater. A place full of people, a place full of witnesses, a place where reputation mattered. They also chose the messenger, a man named Vincent Calibri. He was known for confidence. He was known for aggression. He believed strength came from intimidation. To him, public disrespect was the strongest move possible. The plan was simple. Walk into Harlem. Approach Bumpy Johnson. Disrespect him in front of everyone. If Bumpy reacted, it would justify violence. If he stayed calm, he would look weak. Either result seemed good to them. What they did not consider was preparation. They assumed Bumpy would be surprised. They assumed he would react emotionally. They assumed he would think like them. He did not. Because this plan was based on noise, not understanding. They misunderstood the environment. They misunderstood the people. And most of all, they misunderstood patience. Public shame only works when a leader stands alone. Bumpy Johnson never did. By the time the plan was approved, the outcome was already changing. Not because of force, not because of threats, but because information had already started moving. And when information moves first, power follows. Power does not always announce itself. Sometimes, it listens. While the plan to shame Bumpy Johnson was being discussed, it was not hidden as well as its creators believed. Meetings were held, voices were raised, confidence grew, and someone was always nearby. A man most people ignored. A man they did not see as important. He cleaned floors. He emptied ashtrays. He listened. In rooms where powerful men spoke freely, he was treated like furniture. Invisible. Silent. But he remembered everything. Details. Names. Dates. Places. That information moved quietly through the city. Late at night, it reached Harlem. When it reached Bumpy Johnson, he did not react. He did not get angry. He did not rush. He thanked the man. He made sure the man was protected. Then he sat alone and thought. Information changes everything. Because when you know what is coming, time becomes your advantage. Bumpy now knew who was involved, what the plan was, where it would happen, when it would happen. Nothing was left to guess. This was no longer a threat. It was a schedule. And with a schedule, patience becomes power. Bumpy did not stop the plan. He did not warn anyone. He did not move early. Instead, he allowed it to continue. Because stopping it would solve only one problem. Letting it happen could solve many. This is the difference between reaction and response. Reaction ends a moment. Response reshapes the future. and Bumpy Johnson was thinking about the future. With the plan fully clear, Bumpy Johnson faced a choice. There was an easy option. End the problem early. Quietly, before anyone noticed. That would remove one man. But it would not remove the pressure. Another test would come later. Another insult. Another challenge. Because in his world, silence after disrespect is seen as weakness. Bumpy understood this. So he asked a different question. Not how to stop the moment, but how to stop the pattern. If he acted too soon, the message would be missed. If he acted too small, it would be ignored. The response had to be clear. It had to be understood by everyone watching. And it had to last. This was not about anger. It was about control. Bumpy thought about the future of Harlem. The families who depended on stability. The people who trusted him to keep order. Any decision he made would affect them. That responsibility mattered. So he chose patience. He would allow the public insult to happen. He would allow witnesses to see it. He would allow his enemy to believe he had won. That belief would become the trap. The response would come later. Quietly. Precisely. And when it came, it would end the testing. This was not revenge. It was strategy. Once the decision was made, everything slowed down. There was no more doubt, no second guessing, only preparation. And preparation, when done carefully, changes outcomes. Power looks strong from the outside. From the inside, it is heavy. The night before March 8th, Bumpy Johnson went home late. The city was quiet. Harlem was sleeping. Inside his house, one light was still on. His wife was awake. She did not ask questions right away. She did not need to. She knew him well enough to sense when something important was coming. "You're going to do something tomorrow," she said. It was not a question. Bumpy did not deny it. He sat down and stayed quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady. "Yes," he said. "Something that cannot be taken back." She listened. She was not afraid of him. She was afraid for him. She understood what leadership required. She also understood what it could change inside a person. Power can protect people, but it can also harden the one who carries it. That was her fear. Bumpy listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He did not defend himself. When she finished, he spoke simply. Sometimes, he said, protecting people means carrying the burden they should never have to. He did not speak about anger. He did not speak about pride. He spoke about responsibility. The people of Harlem trusted him. Children walked safely. Families slept without fear. That trust came with a price, and he was willing to pay it. She looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded. "Then make sure it is worth it," she said. "Make sure it protects more than it harms." That night, Bumpy did not sleep much. He thought about his past. He thought about Harlem. He thought about the line that was about to be crossed. By morning, his decision was unchanged. Leadership often requires silence, and sometimes it requires sacrifice. March 8th, 1941. The lights of the Apollo Theater glowed against the Harlem night. Inside, every table was full. People wore their best clothes. Music floated through the room. On stage, Ella Fitzgerald sang softly, her voice calm and steady. But something felt different. Conversations were quieter than usual. Laughter came and stopped too quickly. People sensed tension, even if they could not explain it. Bumpy Johnson sat at his usual table. His back was against the wall. He could see both entrances. He looked calm. Around the room, a few men sat alone. They did not speak much. They watched. They waited. Then the front doors opened. A group of men walked in together. Their presence changed the air immediately. The room grew still. One man walked ahead of the others. Vincent Calibri. He moved slowly, making sure everyone saw him. His footsteps were loud in the silence. People stopped eating. Forks froze in midair. Eyes followed him as he crossed the room. He walked straight toward Bumpy Johnson's table. When he stopped, the two men looked at each other. One was calm. The other was confident. Vincent spoke loudly, so everyone could hear. He delivered his message. He leaned in close. Then he showed public disrespect. The room went completely silent. Everyone waited. They expected shouting. They expected sudden movement. They expected the night to explode. Instead, Bumpy Johnson stayed seated. He finished what he was doing. He reached for his napkin. He wiped his face once. Slowly. Carefully. Then he folded the napkin and placed it on the table. That small action changed everything. Bumpy stood up. Not fast, not angry, controlled. "Count to 50, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the room. Vincent laughed at first, but his smile did not feel strong anymore. Bumpy looked at the men standing behind him. "You can leave," he said calmly. "Tell your bosses what you saw." He checked his watch. "You have 1 minute." Time stretched. People could hear their own breathing. Every second felt heavy. Some of the men near Vincent began to move away. They understood something he did not. At the last moment, Vincent turned and walked out. Fast. The doors closed behind him. The room stayed silent. Then Bumpy Johnson sat back down. He picked up his fork. He continued his meal. The music slowly returned. But everyone in that room knew the truth. The night was not over. It had only changed direction. When Vincent Calibri left the Apollo Theater, most people thought the danger had passed. They were wrong. What ended inside the room was only the public moment. What followed happened quietly. Bumpy Johnson did not stand up. He did not give orders. He did not raise his voice. That work had already been done. The men who had been watching from different corners of the room began to leave one by one. Not together. Not quickly. Separately. Calmly. Without drawing attention. To anyone else, they looked like regular guests heading home. Outside, Harlem was cold and dark. Streetlights flickered. Cars passed by like nothing unusual had happened. Vincent Calibri felt confident. He laughed. He spoke loudly. He believed he had won. He told himself that Bumpy Johnson had backed down. That belief was his final mistake. Power does not rush. Power waits. The streets around the Apollo emptied slowly. The night swallowed the noise. What happened next did not happen in front of crowds. It did not need witnesses. It did not need an audience. Because the message was already clear. The public line had been crossed. Now the response moved out of sight. And when power moves quietly, it is usually final. The message did not come with a speech. It did not come with a warning. It came quietly. By morning, people across New York started to hear the same thing. Not from newspapers. Not from police. From whispers. From phone calls that ended early. From doors that stayed closed longer than usual. From men who suddenly chose their words carefully. Everyone understood one fact. Vincent Calibri was gone. No one talked about how. No one asked questions. Because asking meant you did not understand the rules. This was not anger. This was not chaos. This was planning. Every part of what followed was deliberate. Measured. Controlled. The city did not panic. It adjusted. Men who had laughed before stopped laughing. Men who talked big stopped talking at all. Because the message was not meant for one man. It was meant for everyone watching. Power does not need noise to be heard. Sometimes silence is louder than violence. By the time the sun reached the rooftops, the lesson was already spreading. Not as fear, as understanding. And understanding lasts longer. The reaction did not come with shouting. It came with meetings. Behind closed doors, men gathered who rarely agreed on anything. They spoke quietly, slowly, carefully. They all asked the same question. Was this worth it? No one argued about what had happened. They argued about what it meant. Some wanted revenge. They talked about strength, numbers, pride. But the older men said nothing at first. They listened. They remembered. They understood something the others did not. This was not a fight. This was a boundary. The message was clear without being repeated. One man had crossed a line, and the response was exact, not random, not emotional. Exact. That scared them more than violence ever could. Because violence can be answered, but precision cannot. They looked at maps. They looked at numbers. They looked at what it would cost. Money, men, time, reputation. And they realized the truth. This was not about territory anymore. It was about survival. The smart choice was not to push back. The smart choice was to step away. And one by one, they did. No public announcement. No agreement on paper. Just silence. Silence is how power retreats when it knows it is lost. From that moment on, Harlem was left alone. Not because it was weak, but because it was protected. After that night, Harlem did not change suddenly. It changed quietly. Shops opened like always. Music played like always. People went to work, raised children, paid rent, but something was different. The noise was gone. Men who once tested limits stopped testing them. Men who once pushed now stepped back. No one needed reminders. Everyone already understood. Respect had a boundary. And that boundary was firm. Weeks later, Bumpy Johnson returned to the Apollo Theater. Same table, same seat, same calm posture. Nothing dramatic happened. And that was the point. No one stared. No one whispered. They simply made space. Because real power does not announce itself. It settles. Life in Harlem continued, but safer, more stable, more predictable. That was the result. Not fear, order. The lesson spread far beyond Harlem, not through stories told loudly, but through behavior that changed quietly. No one tested that line again. Not because they were forced to obey, but because they chose not to cross it. And that is how true power lasts. It does not need to be repeated. It does not need to be proven again. Once was enough.